Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we're in chapter 25, creating banking rules. Many clients find that around 80% of their transactions are repeated transactions. Checking, adding, and categorizing these transactions can be a real chore. Sometimes clients can run into issues when they are recording transfers between accounts in the bank feed. Bank rules can help speed up the matching processes. Rules can identify repetitive bank feeds and automatically suggest a match. The client can set rules to tell QuickBooks Online what to do with downloaded bank activities that meet a particular set of conditions. Rules can be prioritized, copied, edited, deleted, and exported. Clients can even create bank rules to add transactions to the register automatically. Rules can also be used to automatically split transactions. Bank rules have two elements: conditions and actions. Conditions define which transactions to look for in the bank feeds and can include criteria such as specific bank account, a keyword in the description, or a transaction amount. Whereas for action, these tell QuickBooks Online what to do with transactions that meet the rule conditions. For example, automatically posting transactions to the correct account. So create a rule, navigate to the transactions, and select bank transactions. So once we select bank transactions in the banking center from the left-hand navigation, then we go to the rules tab. So once we select the rule tab, we can select new rule. So in the new rule, we can enter the unique name. So mind you, sometimes we might have multiple different kind of rules. So we want to make sure that the name that we assign to each rule is unique. So for example, a best practice is to look to assign a rule a very descriptive name. Let's say, for example, if we look in the transactions, in the bank transaction, we look at these transactions here. Let's say we have rental. Okay, so the description is a rental. So if we want to assign a rule, we can just look from this description. We can say a rental. So let's give the rule as rental. So in this case, if we're creating the rule now, let's go and just add, say, rental. So this is our rule. So once we give the name, then we can define the rule condition to specify the transaction that the rule should apply to. So we have to specify which account the transaction will be in from the drop down. So here we can see that the transaction is a money out transaction. So we have money in and money out transaction. Then we can also assign which bank account the rules should apply to. Okay, because we have checking, savings, and MasterCard. So in this case, we can select a specific bank account. Maybe if we're using the credit card, we can say this rule apply to the MasterCard account. We can then specify the condition that the rule will use to identify the transaction. You can choose description, bank text, or we can also select amount from this drop down. So as you can see, you have the option to select the bank text. Bank text is the transaction detail that QuickBooks Online receive from the bank. Whereas for description is QuickBooks Online shorten and clean up interpretation of the bank text. Please note that it is more useful to create a rule referencing the bank text than the description. If you select description or bank text, you get the options that says it either contains, doesn't contain, or is exactly from here. Choosing contain as part of a rule permits many transactions to be assigned to one set of action. By selecting doesn't contain, clients can filter out specific transactions so QuickBooks Online exclude them when it applies the rule. Is exactly is used to create a condition for an exact match. Once the client has made the choice from the drop down, they can enter the text, let's say rental. So whatever the text or the information that you want to enter that will identify the item, that will select the transaction. Okay, so that's the condition. So we have entered the rental as the condition. We can also add multiple conditions. We can say maybe it contain another what if we know maybe the transaction has multiple condition, we can enter multiple condition, or we can say in this case instead of description we say amount, okay, equals to 4,000. So that's the other condition. So if you choose to match the transaction by amount, please note you have equals, is greater than, or less than. They can add up to 5 conditions by selecting add a condition from the drop down. To check whether a rule is identifying correct transactions, select test rule. So you see currently the rule is saying this rule will apply to 0 currently on review transactions. So let's delete this amount because we don't have the amount that meets that criteria. So now let's test the rule. You say this rule apply to 0 condition. So we can change this to something else. Let's change this rule to Hicks hardware. Okay, so now this is the rule. Then it's a money out transaction. We select the bank. So in this case we say all bank. Then we say it contain hardware. So now let's test the rule. So you can see this rule apply to 2 currently unreviewed transactions. So now we know our rule works. Okay, defining what actions QuickBooks Online should take once the client have specified which transaction QuickBooks Online should look for. They can define what action it should take with transactions that meet the specified condition. So any of the transactions that meet the specified condition that we've given here, we can tell QuickBooks Online the action that QuickBooks Online should take. The transaction type, we can categorize it as a transfer or expense or a credit card payment. So in this case, let's just say transfer an expense. Then for the category, we can categorize this transaction, whether be insurance, advertising, or a job expense. So in this case, this is just for an example. So in this case, we can select advertising. It doesn't mean the expense is actually for advertising, but we just wanted to assign it to a category. Then the pay. So the pay depends on whether the transaction is a money out or a money in transaction. So for money out transaction, the pay can be a vendor. Okay, for this, because it's a money out transaction, the pay will be a vendor. If it was a money in transaction, the pay can be a customer. Okay, let's say if we had changed this to money in this case the transaction type would have been something else. Like you see, it's either a deposit, transfer, okay, or a credit card payment. That would have been the option. And in the category, we can see the options here that we have. So because we say this was a money out transaction, that's why we have expense. So we have expense, transfer, check, or credit card payment. So those are the options. Then, so for the, if we had selected like a money in transaction, the pay here would have been a customer. You see, we have Amy, Sanctuary, and then bills, color cars. These are the customers. But if we change it to a money out transaction, this would have been a vendor. So if you see on the options, you can see Bob's, Brooks. So these are the options we have. So now then we can see we have customer name, but in this case we can skip the customer. Then we can also add a tag if there was any tag, but in this case we don't want to add any tag. Then we can select plus assign more. So when you select assign more, you have the option to add a memo. So you can add a memo to the transaction. Let's say this is a test. Then you can see we have the auto add, automatically confirm transaction. This rule will apply to it. So using the auto add feature, you can create bank rules that automatically accept transaction into the client's books. To turn the auto add, we move the slider here. We can turn it off and turn it on like this. This auto add feature should be used with caution and only by users who are experienced in working with bank rules. So if you decide to add the auto add, normally you have to add another condition about the expected dollar amount. Let's say for example, if we say this hardware, the description contain hardware, we might add the dollar amount. Let's say every month we pay 4,000 of this hardware. So on the description here, we can select amount equals to 4,000. Okay, so that this rule will apply. But since we don't have 4,000, that's the reason why we can just go with this. But before you can select the auto add, it is advisable as a best practice to include the amount so that the auto add feature can actually add the exact amount. So it doesn't add something that is not intended to be added. Maybe you add the wrong transaction, because sometimes the transactions might be the same text description, but they might be for a different kind of transaction. So that's why we should use the auto add with caution, and of course add more rules, more conditions, so that until it meets all those conditions before can auto add the transaction. So once we finish, we click save. So now you can see this is the rule that we have now. So here from the action column, here we can edit. We have the option to edit the rule. If the conditions have changed, we can edit this rule. Then we can also see we have the option here to export the rule. Let's say we have another situation, we want to use this rule, we can export it to be used on another transaction or account. Maybe we have another QuickBooks Online that we want to apply this same rule to, we can export it. We also have the option to import the rules. So let's say we want to bring rules from our desktop that we exported previously. We can click browse and select the rules. Follow the on-screen instructions. Please note that the QuickBooks Online applies rules on a chronological order. Okay, that is, you can see this is priority number 1. So now if we create another rule, let's say this is a rent applied to all bank accounts, then we select renter as the rule, then this is going to be an expense. Then in the category, let's say rent, okay, or we can say equipment rental. Then we also have the payee, we can select, that is the vendor's name. The tag, no, we can skip that. Then auto add, we can select that. So we save. So once we save, you can see that we have priority number 1. You see, you can reorder the priority of this rule. So currently rule number 1 will first apply before rule number 2. But if you want to change that, if you want rule number 2 to first apply before rule number 1, you can select the grip and move it. So now the A rental is now number 1 priority, and then Kicks rule will be, the hardware rule will now be number 2. Please also note that if you select the auto add, that is this feature, if you select it, the transactions won't show up in the for review tab. So you won't see that transaction because the transaction will be added automatically to the categorized transaction. Okay, so you won't see it in the for review. Let's say if we go to for review, you can see we have the for review here. So any transaction with the rule that we've selected to auto add will be automatically categorized. As you can see here, you see these words automatically added, so you won't see it in the for review. So you look in the auto add. Then we can also, if we select does not contain, like for example, if we select that doesn't contain, meaning it will exclude the transaction, it won't add it, it will exclude it. So if they exclude the transaction, it will be under the excluded. So from the action column here, you can edit. Then if you click the down arrow, you have the option to copy, disable, and delete role. Then here also you can check the column that you want to display. Let's say currently we can see condition, the settings. So if we don't want to show the condition in our display, we can check it off. So now you can see applies to the rule name. So we have the option to change that. So if we want to show the condition again, we select. Now you can see the condition column. Then the status, if we want to show the status, whether the rule is active or inactive, we can select here on the status. Then we also have, if let's say for example, if we disable this rule, now you can see the status show disabled. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like if you like the video, share, and turn on the notification bell. See you in the next video. Thank you.